at home, and it will be a test for both of them. We won't agree on many things. Where we will, and where we won't, we will remain the effective opposition in the House of Commons. I also know a little bit from my experience on the Intelligence and Security Committee about the national security responsibilities that the Home Secretary has to enact, and it gets even bigger, the challenges, when one becomes Prime Minister. And so I wish her strength and wisdom in dealing with matters that are potentially life and death questions. Those are matters for the Home Secretary and matters for the Prime Minister, and we wish her well in those. I am pleased that the Prime Minister has led in the debate. That wasn't the plan of the government. Perhaps it's the new style of the new government that she thought that on this important issue she should lead, and we very much welcome that, because this is a huge matter. It's probably going to be the biggest spending decision by this government. And given that, and I'll come back to this, I find it utterly remarkable that now, a number of hours into this debate, we still have no idea whatsoever of what the through-life cost of Trident replacement are. We can have different views on that's a good thing, that's a bad thing. It's necessary, it's not necessary. I asked the Prime Minister twice. She has the opportunity, if she wants to intervene on me now, to give us that number, because it's really important. I think she's not, because she would prefer not to say the number. It's for her to explain. No doubt her SPADs will be asked by the Fourth Estate later on, why is it that this government is asking for us to vote for something but cannot tell us how much it's going to cost? I mean, it is remarkable that in this, the biggest... I will take an intervention from the Prime Minister if she wishes to, unless the honourable gentleman can give that number. Can he give that number to the House now? No.
Oh. Well, you're going to... Well, I was merely going to ask the right honourable gentleman, at what cost would he be supporting it? This is not a matter of money and spending as far as he's concerned. That is a smokescreen. Yeah.
I'll help him and his colleagues. There are no circumstances that we would spend any money on nuclear weapons whatsoever. But
you're supposed to be a Conservative.
This is a motion before the House that is being proposed by the government that the honourable gentleman and his honourable and right honourable friends are being asked to support in the lobbies. Now, the last time I looked, I thought Conservative MPs took pride in fiscal rectitude of making good decisions about taxpayers' money. Remarkable that not one single one of them has insisted that their front bench can tell us this evening, on the biggest spending decision of this Parliament, what it's going to cost. I ask again, will anybody from the Treasury bench enlighten the House? Anybody? Again, answer there came none. I hadn't actually ended with the consensual stuff, incidentally. Sorry, I got ahead of myself a little bit. My apologies. Because I wanted to make the point about something that's not been brought up thus far. And perhaps it's the reason why the Prime Minister is here today. It wouldn't surprise me. Because one of the first things that a Prime Minister needs to do on taking office is to write 4 letters. I'm not asking what the Prime Minister has written or is writing in those letters. She writes a letter to the 4 submarine commanders. And we pay tribute to those who serve in our name. It's one of our numbers on these benches whose husband served as a submariner on a Trident submarine, was one of the last people to fire one of those missiles in testing. I should say, incidentally, he's now an SNP councillor and is opposed to the renewal of Trident, but remaining with the oh, forgive me, I mentioned my right honourable friend.
And I thank my right honourable friend for mentioning my husband, who did fire the Trident missile, and not only is he an SNP councillor, he's here in Parliament today and he's a member of Scottish CND. I've made the point before, we support the personnel working in these submarines absolutely 100%, but not all of those personnel support the weapon they're being asked to deliver.
My honourable friend makes her point very well, and I would, still remaining on the consensual side of this important debate, I would want to stress that we on these benches do not confuse those who are in favour of renewing Trident with the thought that they would actually want to kill millions of people. However, as the Prime Minister herself has confirmed from the dispatch box today, the theory of nuclear deterrence is based on the credible potential use of weapons of mass destruction. And so for those who vote for its renewal, they need to square the theory with the practice of what this actually means. And having said all of that, given the boldness of the Prime Minister's personnel decisions in the recent days, she's clearly been thinking about new ways on how to take things forward in a number of different ways. And in that respect, I do think it's hugely disappointing that she clearly has not taken any time to consider, perhaps reconsider, the wisdom of spending, frankly, an absolute fortune on something that can never be used and is not deterring the threats that we face today. I say again, we have yet not had any confirmation on what this government plans to spend on this, and expect members both on the Labour benches, and the government benches, to sign a blank cheque for this. I'm sorry that the Prime Minister has clearly not given any new or detailed consideration for embracing the non-replacement of Trident, which would offer serious strategic and economic benefits, as outlined in the June 2013 report, The Real Alternative. And for those who haven't read it, I would suggest that they do. In the last debate that took place in this House, which was on the 20th of January 2015, it was a debate called by the SNP on Trident replacement, with support from Plaid Cymru, the Green Party, and I think I'm right in saying it was co-sponsored by the Honourable Member for Islington. We outlined that the advantages included, and I quote, improved national security through budgetary flexibility in the MOD and a more effective response to emerging security challenges in the 21st century, as well as improved global security through a strengthening of the non-proliferation regime, deterring nuclear proliferation and de-escalation of international tensions, and then goes on to point out the potential vast economic savings of more than £100 billion over the lifetime of a successor nuclear weapons system, releasing resources for effective security spending as well as a range of public spending priorities. Now, this seems to be pretty important, given that in February 2015, when the Ministry of Defence was asked this question, the Right Honourable Member for Ludlow, who's not in his place but was here before, and I gave him notice that I would be raising this, I have already in an intervention to the Prime Minister, and I do it again now. In 2015, last year, he said that the estimated annual spending on the Trident replacement programme beyond Main Gate in 2016 was, and I quote, being withheld as it relates to the formulation of government policy and release would prejudice commercial interests. Well, we are part and parcel of formulating government policy, Madam Deputy Speaker, here today, and we are expected to sign a blank cheque for something that we have absolutely no idea what the final cost is going to be. Of course, the Right Honourable Gentleman who serves as the Chairman for the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has made a calculation. Perhaps he was going to be speaking about it if he catches your eye, Madam Deputy Speaker. He worked out that the in-service costs of a missile extension until 2016, the total cost of the Trident replacement programme would be £167 billion. Of course, I'm happy to give way.
Very grateful that I can dispose of this part of my speech. The actual updated figure is now £179 billion, based on the capital costs. These are the government's own figures, based on the capital costs of £31 billion with a £10 billion contingency, and then the government's assumptions about 6% of the defence budget as running costs, making an assumption of a 32-year in-service life, and that then brings you to £179 billion total.
The Right Honourable Gentleman, it's a very, very helpful intervention. I'm not sure whether those numbers take account of the currency fluctuations that has impacted on sterling. Oh, it doesn't. I see him shaking his head from a sedentary position. So we should assume that it's even higher than £179 billion. Of course, there was a calculation made in May this year that suggested that it would be £205 billion. This is a massive sum. Well, the Defence Secretary sits and shakes his head. Would he like to intervene on me now and tell us the number? New guesstimate. I'd be happy to give way to the Foreign Affairs spokesman.
I'm very grateful. Is the Honourable Gentleman aware that when there was a Freedom of Information request on the costs, full life costs, the MOD came back with this response: the government needs a safe space away from public gaze to allow it to consider policy options unfettered from public comment about their affordability.
And I suppose we should then be asking ourselves whether that safe space is the House of Commons. Because we are none the wiser. We've asked again and again and again, and I'm looking at the Defence Secretary again, and he has the opportunity to intervene on me now, again, to tell the House, to tell Parliament, how much money his government wishes to invest in the successor programme.
Blank cheques. Blank cheque, Fallon.
Update,
Blank
there
checks.
came none.
Blank cheques. Blank cheque Tories.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not just about the cost. For us in Scotland, it's a question also about democracy. Because the people of Scotland have shown repeatedly and clearly and consistently that we are opposed to the renewal of nuclear weapons. When we went to the country, the electorate, on a manifesto commitment, we won elections in 2007, we won elections in 2011, we won elections in 2015 and 16, running on an explicitly anti-Trident manifesto. I am delighted to be joined on the front bench by the honourable member representing Faslane and Coolport, because the electorate of Argyll and Bute preferred an SNP parliamentarian elected on a non-Trident or a Liberal Democrat. But it's much more than an issue of party political difference, because in Scottish public life, civic life, from the Scottish Trade Union Congress to Scotland's churches, the Church of Scotland, the Bishops' Conference issued a statement this week. The Scottish Parliament has voted on the subject. All have voted or called for opposition to Trident renewal, and there's cross-party support, not just from the SNP, but from the Greens, from Scottish Labour. Almost every single one of Scotland's MPs tonight will vote against Trident replacement. It is a poor indictment of the new administration that the first motion in Parliament is renewing Trident when there are so many other pressing issues facing the country in the context of Brexit. It is obscene that the priority of this government, and sadly too many people on the Labour benches, at a time of Tory austerity and economic uncertainty following the EU referendum, is to spend billions of pounds on outdated nuclear weapons that we do not want, do not need and could never use. With debt, deficit and borrowing levels forecast to get worse after Brexit, and more than £40 billion to be cut from public services by 2020, spending £167 billion, or £179 billion, or £205 billion, or whatever the number the government is not prepared to tell us it actually is an outrage. The Prime Minister's first vote is on Trident, and in the current climate this is totally wrong. It is the wrong approach to key priorities. We should be working to stabilise the economy and sorting out the chaos caused by the Brexit result. The Prime Minister has already undermined the words of her first speech, which I think many people across all parties found important. She vowed to fight against burning injustice, and we agree. But Trident fights no injustices. Trident is an immoral, obscene and redundant weapons system. And the vote on Trident is one of the most important this Parliament will ever take. And we have a government and, as a Parliament, an obligation to inform the public about such a massive decision. They have failed to do that. The Labour opposition is facing three ways at the same time and letting the government get away with this. We in the SNP are absolutely clear in our opposition to Trident. We would not commit to spend hundreds of billions of pounds on WMD, particularly at a time when this government is making significant cuts to public services. It would be both morally and economically indefensible. I am summing up. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, today almost every single Scottish MP will vote against renewing Trident nuclear missiles. Only a few short weeks ago, Scotland voted to remain within the European Union. If Scotland is a nation, and Scotland is a nation, it is not a normal situation for the state to totally disregard the wishes of the people.
Hear,
and this
hear.
government has a democratic deficit in Scotland, and with today's vote on Trident, it's going to get worse, not better. It will be for the Scottish people to determine whether we are properly protected in Europe and better represented by a government that we actually elect. At this rate, that day is fast approaching.